What's up, YouTube? It's your boy AP, and today we're going to go over my Stormweaver Spark character that stuns enemies. This is a budget-friendly endgame Archmage build guide, and it's centered around a glove called Katako's Current, which allows our sparks to inflict stuns on enemies via the Electrocute mechanic. For those of you unaware, Electrocute is a new ailment to Path of Exile 2, which is by default a 5-second full disable. You might be wondering, what's the advantage of using this new sort of tech over a more generic freeze to stun? Well, the obvious one is that lightning keeps its shock ailment, which is a massive scaler to our damage. Spark is also overall just a comfortable premium skill, which is one of my favorites to blast maps with. While this build does center around Electrocute as a defense, we do stack on some more layers for extra measure. We use a wand plus shield setup, which gives us effectively 50% more EHP than we would with a staff. We're able to still get the Sigil of Power staff implicit through weapon swap abuse. Now, I was initially planning to make my build Chaos Inoculation with Mind over Matter. However, we've adjusted to go neither of these. They require too much investment to get comfortable, and we're on a shoestring budget here. So instead, we're going for Eldritch Battery, as well as partial damage taken on mana before life. 34% to be exact, which still gives us solid enough defense, but is much easier to gear. Going Eldritch Battery to shift all our energy shield onto our mana also inflates our Archmage damage to really beef up our damage and get through our maps quicker. There are expensive options to scale this further, such as the Everlasting Gaze Amulet, although the only core items necessary are the Katako's Current unique glove, as well as a wand with plus levels to lightning gems, as well as cast speed. Alright, so let's get into this setup. So first up, I should mention in the video's description, you're probably going to find a Mobalytics URL, as well as this Google Sheets document, because I can upload these things on the fly post-release. Right now, this Google Sheets has identical gems to my character, however, still pretty early on. I don't have 6 links yet. As I get them, I will flesh this out. It's something to keep in mind. You're probably going to get video updates as well regardless, but this will be completely live. I do want to talk about the skills and gems in game though. What they do and the supports. So Sigil of Power is implicit on a staff, so you're going to have to get this in your weapon swap. And the way it works is when you press it, no matter what you have on your current swap, it's going to pull out the staff and cast Sigil of Power. And now when you press Spark inside of it, you're going to see our DPS number goes up. Since the more mana you spend in Sigil of Power, the more damage you're going to do, quite significantly. So this is just a DPS steroid. Now we're going to have to set up our skills so that every other skill pulls out the wand and shield combo. To do that, you click the arrow on all the skills and make sure the check mark is on the weapon set. For me, it's number 2 that has the shield and the wand. So you do that for everything. And then the Sigil Power automatically goes to the staff. Every other ability pulls out the wand. Next up is Spark. Right now I have 4 sockets on it. I use Pierce, Arcane Tempo, Considered Casting, and Mobility. Now, mobility might seem counterintuitive because it's a 20% less damage penalty, but it's pretty important because you are going to be running through maps, blasting, and this lets you move faster. And movement speed is king in this game, and this helps us clear maps. Next up, Orb of Storms. This is a utility spell to inflict exposure. So this gives us lightning exposure, conduction, controlled destruction. And you can automate this using Ascendancy Point. If you go for Tempest Caller, it gives us the skill called Elemental Storm, which is going to, it's like a little ground dot placed under the boss when you crit. And we cast Spark so much, so fast that you're always going to be proccing this as soon as it's off cooldown or very soon after. That skill also hinders enemies, which slows them, so it's a pretty good defensive option here. Tempest Caller. I would love to have it, but I only have 2 labs right now. So we're making do with Orb of Storms for the time being. Next up, conductivity. This is our curse. You could opt for enfeeble or temp chains. However, since we are electrocuting enemies, which is stunning them, I felt like getting the most damage is probably worthwhile. We have heightened curse to give us increased damage from it. Focus curse, because there's a little bit of a delay. You push it on the ground, then it pops. This makes it pop quicker. And Hex Bloom is great for mapping because you throw it on a monster, and as you kill that monster, it's going to spread to other monsters. It's just a great setup for mapping. Frostwall is sort of a panic button. Sometimes you're going to be in a scenario where you're just getting swarmed, and we have the spots in the hotbar, so might as well put it on here. You don't have to press it very often. It's nice though because you can shoot through it. We have Pierce. So, you know, this is just a no-brainer. I have Icicle and Spell Echo, but honestly, Icicle's more useful when it's when you're scaling cold and you want to explode it. You don't really want to explode this, so you know, maybe we don't suggest this. I'm not too sure what we put on that. Flame Wall, I'm actually not using this. This is great through the campaign because it gives us some extra flat damage, but it's pretty small once you get into pretty high DPS territory on your actual Spark character. So this is just in here as like a legacy link. I had Fortress and Persistence on it. We can actually just take this out. It's not worth the button press. We have better buttons to press. Archmage, this is our buff. And for you get 6% damage as extra lightning damage for every 100 mana you have. So that means at 2000 mana, you double your damage. 6 times 20. It's actually more than that. This got buffed before the leak, so this is even more damage than we thought it would be. Okay, moving on, Mana Tempest. So this gives us a ton of damage when you're standing in it. We can look at our tooltip. We go from 5,200 up to 6,600, but your mana drains progressively faster as you're standing in it. So the way I like to use this, if there's tanky stuff in the map, you know, you just throw it down, blast it, it's going to die really quickly, then move on. And when you're fighting bosses, if you're ever at full mana, even in just standing in this for a split second is going to really amp your damage. It's going to feel quite nice. I believe that's all the gems. It's pretty easy on the hands. You can, for the most part, just hold down Spark, but we do have extra buttons in case you need the damage steroid. Anyways, let's move on to the character's passive tree. So we are a mana stacker, which means we want to have Arcane Surge. This gives us a lot of cast speed and a lot of mana regeneration rate. You follow the tree down to the next node, it just buffs Arcane Surge even further. That's going to be our first 2 points. Now you have 3 other great options for your last 2. Strike Twice. This is sort of a win more node where you need to have a lot of damage to inflict shock, and shock gives you a lot more damage as well. So this lets you have 2 shocks on an enemy, but your shocks, instead of lasting for 4 seconds, last 2 seconds, which means you need to shock the enemy every single second for this to be optimal. And you can easily just look at the boss and see, is it having full shocks all the time? Because you'll see the shock debuff twice. So that's to tell how you can tell if this is effective or not. I already talked about Tempest Caller. I do like this. It's just, you know, we get the lightning exposure, which is a lot of damage, and you don't have to press that button to get it. Scouring Winds, it makes the lightning exposure much more powerful. So you could opt for, I guess, the theoretical most damage would be Scouring Winds with Strike Twice, but I do like the quality of life of this, so I will likely end up going this. For the tree, I think we should just speak in generalities first. We don't want to scale Energy Shield because Eldritch Battery is converting all the Energy Shield to mana from our gear. But the thing is, percentage Energy Shield doesn't factor in on that. There is a case where you do want to scale Energy Shield, and that is if you're using this expensive amulet, Everlasting Gaze, because this doesn't get converted through Eldritch Battery. Gain a percentage of your mana as extra maximum energy shield. So you just get a bunch of free energy shield from that, which will get scaled from the tree. If you're not using that, you should not have any energy shield scaling. Now, we're not using Mind Over Matter because Mind Over Matter has a huge penalty to our mana recovery. Also, a problem with Mind Over Matter is all damage taken from mana before life, and we are a life-based setup. So if you do take this, your mana is going to go to 0, and the monsters are going to keep hitting you as they kill your life. And you're going to try and press your mana flask, but you're not going to be able to get your spell off because they're hitting your mana. It's just a terrible setup. So instead of doing that, we're going to go for partial Mind Over Matter, which is this stat, damage is taken from mana before life. And you get it here, here, over here, and that totals to 34%. You can also get 4% on a jewel. So you can max it even further. Just be aware, the more you scale that, the more pressure there is on your mana regen, the more mana regen you're going to have to scale as well. As for the rest of the tree, you know, we start off going through spell damage. Spell damage is great. Mana regeneration, great. Cast speed, we love it. Go through the lightning damage. A bunch of mana nodes here. You are going to want to take the entire lightning subtree up here. It's just huge damage. And to get to the Eldritch Battery, we're going through a bunch of mana nodes. For Spark in particular, it really likes projectile speed because Spark can hit multiple times. So if your Sparks are piercing an enemy really fast, they might hit an object in the map, turn around and bounce back and hit that enemy a second time. And that's going to be a lot more damage. It also just feels smoother because as your projectiles are shooting out faster, you are electrocuting enemies faster. They're getting electrocuted off screen, being stunned, and you don't have to deal with their bullshit. Skill effect duration is also great. Spark by default lasts for 2 seconds. If we can make it last for 3 seconds, again, you're going to get more multi-hits. So I'm quite low level. I think I'm level 75, but we will be going for the skill effect duration later. Obviously, you're going to want to get Int because Int transforms into 2 mana. So 2 mana for 1 Int. Every one of these nodes is 10 mana. Everything else is pretty straightforward. You know, effective Arcane Surge buffs our Arcane Surge, gives us more cast speed, more mana. Damage recoup. So the way recoup works is it lasts over 8 seconds. So if you take 20% damage, or sorry, if you take a hit, 20% of that hit is going to be given back as mana regen over 8 seconds. It's split evenly over 8 seconds. That's what that stat means. And down here, we get some block nodes. Make good use of our shield. Because we're right now, I'm at 55% block, even though the shield only has 38%. And that means half of the hits we're taking are going to do nothing. The way passive block works, I believe, is that the enemy has to be shooting at your face. But the way we clear the map is we're either running forward shooting enemies or we're kiting backwards shooting enemies. So the projectile should always be coming at our face regardless. So it's not really an issue, but that's just how you should approach things. And yeah, that's the tree in a nutshell. We can scale it further, but I don't think a lot of you guys are too far in, and I guess you can find the progression as I scale my character. It's going to be on the Mobalytics page, so you can find that in the video description. I'll also probably be making a high budget video of this, and you'll find it on YouTube as well. As for the gearing, it's all pretty bare bones and budget. We have Katako's Current, which allows us to electrocute for that nice 5-second disable. We have a shield. For shield, you want to get the stat increased block chance. The tier doesn't matter too much. I believe the worst tier is 40, the best tier is 80. As long as you get it on the shield, it's going to be great. I suppose I should mention a unique option here, which is Oaksworn Sigil Crest Shield. This has pretty good block chance. It gives us 50 to Spirit and Chaos resistance. So the Spirit can be used to add something else, you know, whether you want to automate a curse I think you need actually 10 more to do that, but you know, you do something with it. You can also get Spirit on the body armor and amulet. But I'm doing pretty bare bones. We aren't doing that yet. Weapon, next most important. I think I've mentioned this many times in different videos. You want to scale your lightning spell skills because flat damage is gained from plus levels. And every other scaler is scaling off of that flat damage. So it goes a long way to get some flat damage. The rest of the gear, the stats you want to prioritize are life, since we're life-based. Energy shield, because energy shield gets converted directly into a higher mana pool. And then obviously mana, because we are scaling mana. And for suffixes, just try and cap your resistances. My character has low lightning res, but everything else is pretty good. You can use the runes as an easy way to get some extra resistances if you can't find enough on your suffixes. Now my rare gear is nothing special. Definitely not max roll life or max roll mana. Obviously for boots, you do want to get movement speed because, you know, speed again is map clear. It's also safety in boss fights. All right, I think that wraps everything up. I'll be live later on Twitch TV playing this build. Hope you enjoy the video. Peace.